Welcome back to the Teske Brief. I'm your host, retired Judge Stephen Teske. Now, in our last episode, we laid out the jaw-dropping details of Todd Blanche's out-of-court IRS settlement, a deal that resolved a $10 billion lawsuit by essentially letting Donald Trump settle with himself. We also examined the two-headed monster of that agreement. One, a $1.776 billion, the 1776 250th anniversary coming up, marketing gimmick, payout, fund for political allies. And then second, there's this one-page addendum granting the Trump family blanket tax immunity forever. But when a burst of corruption is this spectacular, the system doesn't simply roll over. It will fight back. And I think the line was crossed on this one for this administration. To defend this breathtaking abuse of power, Todd Blanche and his deputies scrambled for a legal shield. They wanted to make this look normal, right? They wanted to convince the public and a highly skeptical federal judiciary that this was just business as usual. Right. So today, in the conclusion of our bar card series, we look at the sham precedent they tried to use, the historic bipartisan revolt it unleashed on Capitol Hill, and the ultimate independent check that political power can never dismantle. Now, to provide legal cover for their newly minted $1.776 billion slush fund, Blanche's Justice Department pointed repeatedly to an Obama-era class action settlement known as Keep Siegel versus Vilsack. Now, it was a clever attempt at what lawyers call sue and settle. But as anyone who understands the legal process knows, the comparison is not just flawed, it is a deliberate deception. You see, the details of how this deal was brokered, explored in the article Inside the Deal to Drop Trump's $10 billion suit against the IRS, it shows a tight-knit group of loyalist lawyers operating in total secrecy. Now, to make their work look legitimate, they claimed the Keep Siegel case, which resulted in a $760 million settlement for Native American farmers who had faced decades of systemic discrimination by the USDA, served as a perfect historical model. But as legal scholars point out, in this other article titled "There Are Scandals, There is the Law, and then there's this." Well, these legal scholars in that article point out that the differences are vast and irreconcilable. See, first, President Obama was not a party to the Keep Siegel lawsuit. That's very important, unlike Trump in this case. You see, Obama didn't sue his own administration, and he did not personally benefit from the payout, right? Okay? Second, the Keep Siegel settlement was reached after years of exhaustive, highly adversarial litigation in open court, including things like discovery, doing depositions, interrogatories, notices to produce documents, no telling what else, okay? And then third, most importantly, that settlement was submitted to a federal judge, Emmett G. Sullivan, who conducted an extensive public review of the facts and the law before granting final approval. Todd Blanche's deal had none of those safeguards. I mean none. I mean zero. It was hammered out in private by lawyers who all owed their allegiance to the plaintiff, Donald Trump. It bypassed judicial review entirely, which goes back to, remember from the previous episode, the ethical violation of one of the rules, okay? And that is what? Regarding the administration of justice? This is what's going on. They're disrupting it. They're bypassing it. It was designed from its inception to evade the oversight of the courts and the constitutional power of the purse. And if Blanche believed that wrapping this slush fund, because that's what it is, it's a slush fund, in the flag and called it the anti-weaponization fund would appease his own party, well, looks like this time he very much miscalculated, and it was done catastrophically. You see, the backlash on Capitol Hill was immediate, and it was severe, and definitely bipartisan in this case. As documented in the article titled Senate GOP Frustrated with Trump's $1.8 billion payout fund, Senate Republicans were left in scornful disbelief. During a closed-door lunch, Republican senators peppered Blanche with sharp questions he simply could not answer. Who's eligible? What are the guardrails? How do we stop taxpayer dollars from flowing directly to people convicted of assaulting Capitol police officers on January 6th? The frustration was so intense, ladies and gentlemen, that Senate Majority Leader John Thune and other key Republicans took a step virtually unheard of. They halted their own party line reconciliation bill, delaying tens of billions of dollars in critical funding for immigration enforcement. Yeah, key Republicans did that. That's how upset they were about the slush fund. Meanwhile, in the House, Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, a Pennsylvania Republican, joined forces with Democrat Tom Suozzi of New York to introduce legislation specifically designed to block federal dollars from being used to pay out claims through Blanche's fund. Now, as explained in another article titled There's a Way to Stop Trump's IRS Slush Fund, this bipartisan fury was not just about the money, folks. It was about the separation of powers. You know, that thing in the Constitution, the three branches of government, to put checks and balances on one another, okay? It was about a president attempting to usurp the president's in the executive branch, usurping the legislative branch, that's Congress's, exclusive authority under Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution, which says no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law, not by the president, but by law. I mean, this is so plain and in writing in the Constitution. Even for a party cowed by political pressure, Blanche's fund was a bridge too far. They realized that if the executive branch can unilaterally conjure a $1.8 billion slush fund from the Treasury's judgment fund to reward its political base, then the legislative branch ceases to have a purpose. You might as well just cross them off the Constitution. Just take Article 1, just put a big OX on there, because they're worthless at this point. They're worthless. And enough Republican in the Senate and the House realize, okay, this is it. I mean, we're neutering ourselves here, okay? So under immense political pressure, Todd, Blanche eventually walked back the payout fund, publicly stating that the Justice Department would not pursue the $1.8 billion. But as we noted in the previous episode, the federal judge refused to lift the injunction. Why? Well, it's because Blanche wanted to keep the door cracked, you see, while keeping the invaluable permanent tax immunity for the Trump family completely intact. And this is where we witness the deep, systemic tragedy of the Department of Justice. The relentless pressure to trade professional ethics for political obedience has hollowed out that institution. And as we explore in another article that came out titled Todd Blanche is Unfit for Office, and I mentioned that, by the way, in the previous episode, done by the New York Times editorial board, it said that the department has lost more than 20% of it, and it's true, I checked that out, more than 20% of its veteran career lawyers since early 2025. These are institutionalists, seasoned prosecutors who spent decades protecting the Department of Justice's post-Watergate commitment to nonpartisan independence. They chose to resign, take buyouts, or be pushed out rather than sign filings they knew were legally meritless. And to fill that massive void, the department actually waived the requirement that new hires for U.S. attorney have prior experience practicing law. They waived it. You no longer have to have it. You could be right out of law school, no experience, and come join the United States Attorney's Office. Okay, you got to be kidding me. That's a low. The Department of Justice is no longer staffed by elite legal minds dedicated to the Constitution. It's been restaffed with loyalists, vengeance monkeys, who view the law not as a shield for the public, but as a sword for the executive. When the veteran lawyers leave, the guardrails go with them. This is how you end up with an acting attorney general who acts as a private family lawyer for Trump, apparently blind to the fact that he's executing the professional suicide of his own career. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what's going on here? I mean, it's not that he's a stupid person, but I guess he's so blinded he's in a moment you can't fix stupidity. But what Blanche and the authors of this deal fundamentally failed to understand is that political protection is temporary, but professional accountability is permanent. It's going to be there, folks. It's going to be waiting for you. I talked about that, remember, about Pam Bondi. She gets fired. Next thing you know, just like that, you have 100+ people filing in one single complaint against her to have her disbarred from the Florida bar. And you know what? Think about what happened in the first term of Donald Trump. Look at Giuliani and all these other lawyers who filed these false, frivolous claims that the 2020 election was a fraud. But they had no evidence at all, period. Nada, nothing. And you can't do that as a lawyer. You can't file a complaint unless you have at least some probable cause, some good faith basis. They didn't even have that. Okay? And these lawyers, in his second term, now that Trump has amped it up and forcing the Attorney General's office to do things that are clearly ethical violations, and they're looking at what happened to Giuliani and the rest of these lawyers who've been disbarred and disciplined, they said, no, I'm not risking my bar card. That's permanent, okay? I mean, no, I'd rather leave here and keep my bar card and go get another job. But while the president can issue criminal pardons, and while political allies can shield Blanche from congressional subpoenas in the short term, they cannot protect his law license. State bar associations are independent, folks. They're constitutional entities within their states. They do not answer to the president. They don't care about the president. They do not care about political appointments. They care about the rules of professional conduct. Think about it. Giuliani was President Trump's lawyer, and he's disbarred both in D.C. and New York. When Todd Blanche signed that tax immunity addendum, the only government official willing to attach his signature to a document that forced the resignation of Treasury General Counsel Brian Morrissey, he left a permanent, indelible paper trail of professional misconduct. And that's another bit of stupidity. You just give the evidence. Not only are you out there talking on the news, doing all these interviews, meet the press and so on, you sign your name to something that's clearly unethical to sign your name to. But he violated Rule 1.7 on conflicts of interest. He violated Rule 1.9 on duties to former clients. He violated Rule 8.4 on conduct prejudicial to the administration of justice. Once Blanche is no longer in office, the political shield is going to vanish. The bar complaints will proceed like they are doing right now with Pam Bondi. And the independent state bars will do what the courts and Congress were blocked from doing, enforcing the rules. The story of Todd Blanche is a cautionary tale for every lawyer tempted to trade their ethics for their career survival. Titles expire. Administrations fall. Political favors a fleeting commodity. But your bar card is your livelihood. It is your professional life. And if you burn it to serve a temporary king, you'll eventually find yourself standing in the ruins of your own career, holding nothing but a discarded license and the contempt of the profession you swore to uphold. The rule of law cannot be dismantled by the stroke of a single corrupt pen, because the legal profession itself still possesses the power and the duty to police its own. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to this series of the Teske Brief. Keep asking questions. Folks, keep demanding accountability. Think. And never forget that the integrity of our justice system depends on those willing to defend the law when doing so is most inconvenient. I'm Steve Teske. This has been the Teske Brief, and this has also been the Bar Card series. Until the next episode, take care, be safe. Goodbye.